Imagine for a moment, you're Jeff Kaplan, and your new idea is going to rock the world. Overwatch. It's a simple idea, really. You're going to revitalize the class-based shooter genre. You see, before now, class-based shooters have been loadout-based. The differences between classes were mostly in the weapons, of which characters would generally have 2 to 3. But not your game, not Overwatch. Your game is not loadout-based. In fact, most characters only have one gun. It is an ability-based shooter. Using the design principles of MOBAs to add abilities to a first-person shooter is a great idea. And it's an idea that hasn't been done before. You are single-handedly creating a niche and satisfying it. This is a clever idea you had. It's almost perfect. But there's a problem. Just a year after Overwatch begins development, a new game comes out. It's a game that's revitalizing class-based shooters, using MOBA-style abilities. Well, shit. I'm making this video for one reason and one reason only. Garden Warfare doesn't get nearly enough credit. Seriously, just about every video on the subject of class-based / hero shooters all tell the story the same way. Oh well, Team Fortress 2 came out and then literally nothing happened, and then there was Overwatch and it was so unique and original and had so many unique and original ideas. Basically, Overwatch has successfully removed Garden Warfare from consciousness. Garden Warfare has been hydroxed, where even though it was in development first and had 2 releases before Overwatch had 1, people still somehow think it's a ripoff of Overwatch.
Okay, I can spin and just keep spinning apparently. Alright. So like I have reverse ult as my tree ability. They got frickin' Reinhardts on their team. The pirate character is literally just a small roadhog.
And let's make something perfectly clear. Garden Warfare was not a small game. It sold 8 million copies. For reference, that's about 1/3 of a Call of Duty game, just ever so slightly less than Dark Souls, 3 million more than any Kirby game has ever sold, and I cannot stress this enough, nearly the exact same number as Halo 2. And what really annoys me is just how unevenly this unoriginal criticism gets passed on to other games versus Overwatch. Oh wow, Plants vs. Zombies added a character that can transform into a ball? That's ridiculous. Look how shamelessly they're ripping off Hammond from Overwatch. What's that? Uh-huh. Wait, you're telling me that Citron predates Hammond by 2 full years? You know, parallel thinking happens all the time. I'm sure this means nothing. And speaking of thinking, do I genuinely think that Overwatch copied Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare? No, absolutely not. The games are just too different. Overwatch is 6v6, Garden Warfare is massive team against massive team. Garden Warfare has 3 abilities per character, Overwatch has 2. Time to kill is drastically different. They're fundamentally very different games. With that being said, the fact that Garden Warfare was starting development a full 1.5 years before Overwatch started makes me think there's a very high chance that Overwatch took some, if not a lot, of inspiration from Garden Warfare. Obviously nothing as massive as, let's steal every character and ability. But it could easily have been, hey, that one Plant game has an interesting idea using MOBA-style abilities in a third-person shooter. We could do something similar to that. I think a big reason why Garden Warfare is rarely brought up when it comes to class-based shooters is how Overwatch marketed itself. Overwatch was marketed as the next big new thing that was completely original. It was marketed as something that had never been done before, and people bought it. It might feel strange to remember because we've gone so far past this point, but at the time, Blizzard was untouchable. They had home run after home run. If Blizzard told you their idea was completely unique and original, you believed them, because at that time, they probably weren't lying. And for Overwatch, the idea that it is a completely unique and original game that had never been done before was part of the marketing. And I know that why? The developers for Overwatch claim that the basic premise for the game was to do a MOBA essentially in first person, to turn a MOBA into a first person shooter. This is incredibly stupid, dumb, and idiotic and makes no sense. Saying Overwatch is a MOBA is like one of those things that gets repeated endlessly by people who don't know what they're talking about because someone they perceive as smarter than them has told them that it's true. A MOBA isn't just when teams have 5 to 6 people and each character has an ult, they are something incredibly specific. There are exactly 3 lanes, a match takes 1 billion years to complete, you level up progressively through the game, you can buy various whatevers in the shop mid-game, and like 75% of the game is player versus environment. Overwatch has none of these aspects. And to be perfectly clear, these are the things that make a MOBA a MOBA. Even the thing that people who say Overwatch is a MOBA the most point to, the different class roles, aren't even correct. Because MOBAs don't have 3 distinct class roles. There are considerably more than that. Here's where I will admit I start to take out the tinfoil hat. I think the reason why the Overwatch devs claim to be so inspired by MOBAs while really sharing very few similarities is because if they claim their inspiration is from another genre, it shuts down a lot of the more obvious comparisons with games in the same genre, like Garden Warfare. If you follow Overwatch's development, it's pretty clear that taking inspiration from MOBAs is something they started doing later on.
During one of the meetings about this game, Jeff Goodman, one of the game developers that would eventually work on Overwatch, said that he wished there could be 50 classes or more instead of just a few. And that led Jeff Kaplan to making an 8-page PowerPoint of a totally different game, which you can see here. So when Jeff Kaplan presented this idea, at first it sounded like he wasn't going to be into it, but once he actually heard the concept of instead of classes, you have characters with backstories, he was in.
Just about all the actual early information about the pitching of Overwatch, there is basically nothing to do with MOBAs. It seems from all reports to be, hey, what if we did a pretty normal class-based shooter but with way too many characters, and each character was a unique individual? If you were really going for a shooter MOBA hybrid, then why in your early concept stage were 8 of your 10 original characters DPS with only 1 support and 1 maybe tank? This ratio of DPS to healers and tanks lines up way more with earlier class-based shooters like Team Fortress and Garden Warfare, far more than it does with MOBAs or post-Overwatch hero shooters like Marvel Rivals or that other one. Also, unlike Overwatch, Garden Warfare actually does have an emphasis on PvE, making it possibly more MOBA inspired than Overwatch. Putting back on the tinfoil hat for a moment, isn't it also kind of weird that the only game Overwatch was largely compared to on time of release was Team Fortress 2? I don't know if you guys were around, but during the time of Overwatch's release, the Tracer versus Scout debate was everywhere, despite them not being remotely similar in the slightest. They're good at dodging and they do high close range damage, but that's it. They have a different primary weapon and they have different movement abilities. And yet for some reason a bunch of people wanted you to think that Tracer was a copy of Scout. But you know who Tracer might actually be a copy of? The scientist from Garden Warfare. I am 100% serious. Let's go over all the similarities. Both of them have the lowest health on their entire team. Both of them have the fastest base movement speed on their entire team. Their primary weapons are both based around doing damage at close range. Even Tracer's most iconic and famous ability, Blink, yeah, Scientist has that too. Both of them have short-range teleporting abilities. And here's where I really started to feel like I was going insane, because I realized both of them have sticky bombs. And if you really want to be a pedantic jerk about it, both of them have secondary abilities that can heal them. The fact that this connection was never made in favor of the much inferior, less substantiated Tracer versus Scout debate absolutely baffles me. Part of me wonders if the Team Fortress 2 comparison was purposely built up to distract from the more obvious Garden Warfare comparison. Although admittedly, that does sound really insane. Is Tracer really a copy of the scientist from Garden Warfare? No, I don't think so. But I do think it's likely that she was heavily inspired by the scientist. They clearly function differently enough that it's not a one-to-one copy and paste. But it really seems like Overwatch fans do not give the same amount of leeway in the other direction. Marvel Rivals is an upcoming hero shooter that takes the genre name incredibly literally. When this game was first announced, Overwatch fans were very quick to point out all the similarities between the Marvel characters and the Overwatch heroes, even when those connections were loose at best, such as how Spider-Man is literally Genji. Yeah, sure, approximately 0% of their kit is shared, but they have similar playstyles. That means it's the same, right? You know, that actually sounds kind of familiar. And other hits such as Groot is literally Mei, despite them only sharing one ability and being in different class roles. And who can forget the classic, Punisher is literally Soldier 76. Because as we all know, Soldier 76 is the first and only video game character to have an assault rifle. And these types of comments annoyed me immensely. Not because characters shared no similarities. In fact, some Marvel Rivals are really close to Overwatch characters. I just couldn't get over the fact that you think your game did it first? Really? And I think it speaks a lot to the bias I was talking about earlier, because to insist that Overwatch was inspired by Garden Warfare is apparently completely, utterly insane. The games are just too different. And yet, remember, people who aren't aware that Garden Warfare came first often think that Garden Warfare is copying Overwatch.
Okay, I can spin. And just keep spinning, apparently. Alright. So, like, I have Reaver's ult as my tree ability. They got frickin' Reinhardts on their team. The pirate character is literally just a small roadhog.
So how is it that there's enough similarities between the games that if Overwatch came first, people think, oh yeah, this game is definitely copying Overwatch. But when they learn that Garden Warfare came first, suddenly it's an impossibility that it in any way inspired Overwatch. Look, what it comes down to is that Overwatch, at the end of the day, is a natural evolution of the class-based shooter genre. And people, for whatever reason, don't want to admit the existence of the middle child. A lot of this has to do with how disrespected Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare really is. It has a massive stigma around being a kids game, which it kind of is. But you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a game that appeals more towards kids. You know what other games I played as a kid? Halo and Call of Duty. Are these games now too considered lesser art because of that? I mean, just recently there was a big controversy over Balatro and Astrobot being nominated for Game of the Year. Because God forbid something other than an hyper-realistic action-adventure game win Game of the Year. Why is it that people are so certain that a game in a billion-dollar franchise that sold as many copies as Halo 2 had no cultural impact, had no influence on this genre, and it didn't amount to anything?